Hello again, and welcome to another episode of the Pictish Saints Trail. I hope you found our episode on St. Malua to be both interesting and informative, and that it's encouraged you to do a wee bit more research about this Pictish missionary, his life and times, and the places that he evangelised. Today we take a look at another Pictish missionary saint who is reputed to have travelled the length and breadth of northern and eastern Pictland to bring the gospel to the pagans. His name is Drostan, quite a common Pictish name. He was a renowned abbot and hermit and lived in the 6th century. My interest in St. Drostan began when I relocated to Banffshire almost 20 years ago and discovered to my surprise that this geographical area had witnessed a major Christian mission during the Pictish era and a few centuries thereafter. In common with life stories of many Celtic saints, there is one common legend concerning Drostan and several other unsubstantiated stories spread over a couple of centuries. So here are some of them to whet your appetite. The most popular story is taken from the 10th century Book of Deer, where there are a few notes written in Gaelic to the margins of some of the pages. These were probably added around the 11th or 12th century, and the additions briefly relate to the origin of the Columban monastery at Deer, located on land granted from Bede, a Pictish ruler, which St. Columba, before his departure from the area, passed on to the care of Drostan. It's this version from the Book of Deer that was retold thereafter with some embellishment in the medieval prayer book, the Aberdeen Breviary. Another book, Forbes' Calendar of Saints, referring to an extract from the Aberdeen Breviary, said that Drostan was the son of royal Scotai stock, who even as a youth, having been inspired by the mysteries of the incarnation and passion of Jesus, asked to devote himself to the service of Almighty God. His parents handed him over to Uncle Columba to be educated before becoming a monk at Dalcongale. On the death of the abbot, Drostan was elected in his place, but after ruling the monks well, he did not desert his flocks, but committed himself to a life of seclusion, commonly known as being a hermit, and he built the church of Glenesk in Pictland. It's at Glenesk that Drostan gave sight to the blind priest Simon, and it was here that he fasted and led a most holy life until his death. It is said that Drostan's relics were preserved in a stone tomb at Abbot, where many sick people, may find relief. Another late 19th century biography of Drostan by Dom Barrett, a Benedictine monk and hagiographer, is similar to that of Forbes, with both supplementary and varying details. He states that Drostan descended from the line of King Aidan of Dalriada, the friend of St. Columba, and for that reason was sent to Ireland for his education and religious formation by the saint. On completion of his studies, Drostan then returned to Pictland to live as a hermit at Glenesk prior to moving to Iona, where he entered the monastery under Columba's rule, before accompanying Columba on his mission to the Picts. And Barrett goes on to state that Drostan preached the gospel in and around Glen Urquhart, which in pre-Reformation days was called St. Drostan's Urquhart, where a plot of ground said to have been cultivated by the saint when he lived there was known as St. Drostan's Croft. The saint's cross was preserved at St. Ninian's Chapel in the glen, and the custodian of the relic had the use of the croft as a reward for his services. According to Barrett, Drostan died in his monastery of Deer and was buried at Abbot, where miracles were wrought at his tomb. Lastly, the Victorian author of the Reformed tradition, Dr. Archibald Scott, was convinced that Drostan was one of St. Ninian's 12 disciples, whose mission was to evangelise the Pictish nation in an area that ran along the coast from Murray to Buchan and northwards across the sea to Ross and Caithness. Scott asserts that Drostan was a Briton. His father was Prince of Demetia, now part of South Wales. Although Drostan's exact dates are unknown, Scott points out that the Buchan authorities gave Drostan's date as around AD 500, and the publication View of the Diocese of Aberdeen gave the date of his co-worker St Fergus as the beginning of the 6th Age, that is around 520 AD. There's no extant record, however, as to which British or Pictish school that Drostan was trained at, or when. Well, what may now be considered authentic about Drostan? It's agreed that Drostan landed on the Buchan shoreline around Aberdour, established a Christian community with his group of missionaries, and later moved his operations inland, settling at Deer under the sanction of Bede, the then Pictish ruler of Buchan, who may have initially been a bit hostile to the saints' settlement. Scott opined that some centuries later, during the Gaelic ascendancy in Pictland, the names of Drostan and his three, that's Colm, Medden and Fergus, the missionary accomplices, they were removed from their proper historical setting and were woven into legends intended to create a belief in the superiority of the Gaelic mission in Scotland. So the absorption of both the people and the property from Pictish Christianity into the Gaelic, Columban and post-Columban missions went for many decades. Scott claimed that the Gaelic entry in the Book of Deer boldly transforms Colm to Columba as leader of the mission into Pictland, with Drostan the Briton as a subordinate to him. In the recent book Legends of Saints, Scottish Saints, edited by Alan Macquarie, it's suggested that Drostan's name may be of British origin and is sympathetic towards the assertion that Drostan was another Pictish saint who was demoted around the Columban period. And it's interesting to relate that the Aberdeen Breviary mentions Drostan's association with Columba, but not with Saints Colm, Medden or Fergus, but does attribute the miracle of restoring the sight to the blind priest Simon. St Drostan and his missionaries also founded many churches south of the Murray Firth, bringing many outlying Pictish tribes under the influence of the gospel, including the ancient church sites as representative Drostan's foundations. Here are some of them. There was Aberdour and Buchan, Inchingary, Adrothieme on the River Devon, and Aberlour and Alvey on the River Spey, at Glen Urquhart, where Saints Ninian and Ercher, whose missionary endeavours had reputedly previously prepared the way for the Christian church. And then across the Murray Firth from Buchan, St Drostan and his co-missionaries also established churches in and around Caithness and Sutherland, at the Kirk o' Tir, the Church of Canisby, Drostan's church site at Brabstermire, St Trothan's at Castletown of Ulrig, a church site and a churchyard at Westerdale on the Thurso River, and the church site and churchyard at St Trostan's at Westfield. Going back to Skene, he points to the so-called canon of the Celtic church history to remind us that the early Celts gave to a church the name of its actual founder and did not dedicate it to a non-founding saint. Thus, the affiliation of ancient church sites to these men is a guarantee, apart from any records, of personal work at the site in a bygone era. It is acknowledged that while Drostan and his three were extending the church in the northern Pictish parts Other Britons and certain Irish Picts were maintaining a mission in western and southern Brito-Pictish border districts. In the legends of the Scottish saints, it indicates that although the Aberdeen breviary associates Del Congo, perhaps their Congo near Dumfries, Glenesk and Aberdour with Drostan, and refers to Drostan's affiliation with its hermitage at Glenesk and the tomb at Aberdour, surprisingly neither Deer nor the foundation of its abbey nor its book are specifically mentioned, and the relics of Drostan's crucifix being located formerly at the parish church in Urquhart. Yet it's known that the annual St Drostan's fairs were held around the 14th of December at Rothiemere, Aberlour for 3 days, and Old Deer for 8 days. Many Prairie Reformation churches throughout the former Pictland area have been attributed to Drostan. But surprisingly, there's only one parish dedication to him in the Diocese of Aberdeen, which he shares the dedication with Our Lady at Fraserburgh. I wonder if it's possible Scott claims that we have another case of an established Pictish saintly missionary who predates the Columban evangelisation, being realigned as a follower of Columba at a later period. Macquarie boldly states that there may have been a conscious Gallicisation of the church in Pictland, perhaps about the 10th century, with native Pictish churchmen being rebranded for political reasons. So here's my hypothesis. St Ninian was inspired by the monastic communities of St Martin and used that model for his missionary activities at Whithorn and beyond. And he left Whithorn to evangelise both Brittonic and Pictish areas with the gospel. And at some stage, Drostan met him and participated in these missionary works. The monastic operations usually meant that when a community was either established or evangelised, some members of the original missionary community would remain with the new foundation, whilst the other members continued on their journeys. At that new community, the founding monks or priests would train and then send out new missionaries who would in turn do the same thing again, and so on and so on. And we hear of Drostan's mission during the 6th century in eastern Pictland, now Fife and Angus, possibly establishing a community at Markinch, then moving northwards, sailing along the coastline, before arriving with his team at Aberdour Beach. It's known that the Picts were in fact very competent sailors, and all along their coastal waters they built forts and observation towers to protect their territory, their people and their interests. And many of these places can still be seen when you travel along the Buchan and Moray coastline. Adjacent to Aberdour Beach, beside the freshwater burn, may have been where this first monastic settlement of Drostan's was established before he moved inland to set up a missionary headquarters at Deer, from where his 3 leaders, Fergus, Medon and Colm, with their teams, left to evangelise the inhabitants in the surrounding countryside. They were extremely effective in their missionary activity, with their names and their endeavours remembered right even into the 21st century. The Drostan legend makes claims that he and his followers crossed the firth and travelled northwards through what is now known as Eastern Ross, Caithness and Sutherland, evangelising communities, establishing churches and monasteries throughout the north. And it remained very much a legend until Martin Carver and the University of York students undertook a 10-year archaeological dig at Port Mahomet, which proved beyond doubt the existence of a Pictish monastery there, at least from the 7th century onwards. If you ever have the opportunity to visit the Tarbert Centre at the Old Church in Port Mahomet, please do so and learn the fascinating history of the Christian Church in the north. And there's also a most interesting informative Pictish church trail being established in Caithness around Wick, Thurso and beyond, with a formal opening planned in July 2021. Reverting to Drostan, after completing his missionary journeys, he decided to leave his monastic roots, settling in Glenesk and Tarside, where he spent the remainder of his life as a hermit. The Drostan legend finishes with the story of how his monastic community from Deer carried the saint's dead body from Glenesk over the Cairn Mount to his final resting place at Abbot, where many people thereafter claimed great healing miracles through his intercession at his burial site. And it became a place of pilgrimage and prayer until the Reformation period. However, in September 2017, the Banffshire Pilgrimage Group, the Church of Scotland congregation in New Aberdour and the locals, together with the children of Rosehearty School, worked together to successfully celebrate the life of St Drostan. It's pleasing to tell that over 100 people sat down together for lunch in the local hall, and there were various activities, both religious and secular, throughout the day. In this so-called post-Christian era, there is certainly a need for positive church role models who can inspire Christians to boldly evangelise a hostile and postmodern society with gospel values. Much will be gained by further research into the life and times of St Drostan, whose story deserves to be told so that he may regain his rightful place in history as one of the most effective and important missionaries of the Pictish era, preparing the way for those who were to follow him north of the Grampians. So hopefully you too have found the inspiration to do your own research, either about St Drostan, his three, or one of your local saints. Until the next time, God bless you, stay holy and healthy.